Hi, folks. I think we're just gonna get started here. I'm gonna stop sharing my sounds. Give me just a second. It might make me stop sharing my whole screen because I'm not. It did. Give me just 1 second. All right. Welcome everybody. I think we've got some more folks who are going to continue to trickle in while we're here. I know that we have a handful more people registered, but everybody who is spending their evening with us, thank you for your time. I'm going to introduce myself, tell you a little about the program, and then we'll jump in. So I am Sofia Mea Carrero. I am the senior organizing strategist here at the ACLU of Colorado. I came onto this team just this last September, and I really could not be happier to be here. I come from the environmental movement where I built out a big portfolio of justice-oriented environmental policy work and organizing at a couple of different organizations, but I really got my love of politics and thinking about organizing growing up in the San Luis Valley, which was a part of the world in Southern Colorado that is often really overlooked in terms of both governmental programs and support, and really what people think folks from there are capable of. And so I could not be more excited to be able to spend all of my time thinking about how to advocate the best that we can on our civil rights and civil liberties, and also how to, as an organizer, make sure that you all can do that as well. So we're going to have a relatively short program here. I think it shouldn't be more than 30 to 45 minutes. We'll finish up with taking an action and practicing some of the things that we've learned today. And of course, we hope to see you at our next trainings, which I'll plug again at the end. We have a storytelling training tomorrow evening, and then a day at the Capitol where we will take people to do some grassroots lobbying on some housing justice and criminal justice reform on Thursday. So we'll put those registration links in the chat as well. So you are here for Advocacy and Action-Taking 101. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about organizing, some theory of change, and then we're going to take an action. So I'd love to start, if folks will, just by dropping in the chat what issue or value makes you do the work to be an activist. Like, you're here spending time doing this right now. What are the things on your mind that make you want to be here? So like I said, I grew up in a rural part of the state that's mostly Hispanic and Latino and white. And when I was growing up, there was a really high high school dropout rate, particularly for Latinas. And when I was in high school in Alamosa, something that I really witnessed was the way that the police that were in our school would often really over persecute. So we technically had these policies that said that if you were caught fighting, caught vandalizing, caught with drugs on school property, that you'd be automatically charged by the police and by the school. And I know that I got into some petty trouble, like I ditched class a couple of times, etc. And even though I'm a Latina, I'm also really white passing, and I was on a college track. And so the police did not end up pressing any charges against me, which meant that I was able to still qualify for federal loans and grants when I went to college, which made that really possible for me. And a lot of my peers and my friends and close people in my life who were making similar mistakes as me were treated really differently because they were browner than me in that school and in that system. And so some of those opportunities were stripped from them. And so that's something that I really bring into space, is that access to education, but also just to upward mobility in life, basically by staying out of the school to prison pipeline and thinking about justice reform. And that's really what's motivating me today. I'm seeing some people talk about, all right, we've got queer liberation, reproductive rights, we've got rights for the unhoused, incarceration rights, racial equity, immigration. I love that. Yes. Oh my gosh. I love, this is why I always ask for this in the chat, because reading this list also just like brings me joy and motivation. These are all also things that are really important to me and in my heart. So thank you all for sharing. So why do we take action in the first place? We just kind of answered that, right? These values, defending ourselves, our community, and to advocate for what's right. But then also, why do we community organize? We want to make sure that we are changing the system. We also want to use our strengths, right? Like some folks are really good at policy and they go to law school or they get masters in policy and they're able to really get in the weeds. And some of you might be those folks. That is not me, right? I am decent at motivating people. I like thinking about systems change and I like trying to hold my government accountable. And so community organizing is like, those are my strengths. Those are what I know how to do in order to make progress. And lastly, of course, is to build solidarity, because when we are shouting by ourselves, we are not loud enough. A lot of the powers that be and a lot of opposition to protecting and expanding our civil rights and civil liberties are entities with a lot more money and institutional power. But when we are able to lift our voices as one, it prevents us from getting burnt out and exhausted. And it also ensures that we actually get heard. So I kind of just mentioned this, right? We all have our different strengths. And so I really love to start thinking about how do we support progress, recognizing that it actually does take lots of different theories of change, lots of different types of actions and activities in order to make progress happen. In order to hold up progress, we have to have all of these different pillars. And they're all critical. And we're going to keep talking about this because really, to me, one of the magical pieces of community organizing and one of the things that makes me so motivated to just continue to do this work after a decade is that organizers, we get to help try to make these things work together and make them make more sense and talk to each other and collaborate with each other for the sake of progress. So on the left here, we've got direct services. So to think about direct services, we're thinking about people who feed folks who are hungry. We're talking about like food banks and soup kitchens, shelters. We're even talking about often like teachers, people who did AmeriCorps, people who did Conservation Corps, who are like building trails for folks. Cleaning up litter is a direct service. Making sure that people have enough warm clothing is a direct service. These are all really, really critical things that save lives in the moment, and we don't want to see a reduction to direct services. They're important. And then we also have advocacy, which is more the space that organizing tends to sit in. And advocacy is really thinking about how are we pushing for the vision of the future that we have, right? Like, how are we making sure that the systems that be actually work for all people, which we know for a fact they don't right now? And how do we create that justice and how do we advocate for it? And that's what we're talking about here today. But again, they all have to work together. They all have to happen simultaneously to continue to progress. The next thing is voting, which of course, voting is sometimes more within the realm of advocacy. Sometimes it feels like it's maintaining a status quo that can be frustrating. But doing that basic level of like civic participation is another critical way that we're not sliding backwards. Something to really think about, because I think it often for activists, like we get our little hearts broken all the time when we're having to vote for people that we're not that aligned with. But something to really think about is the idea that no matter how hard we're advocating, if we don't actually then have people who can vote on those things, like within the systems, like within the government, within electoral bodies, we can't make them happen. And so, yes, there's definitely a range of what we can be frustrated with, but I know that we have people that we're frustrated with on all sides of the aisle and every single party, depending on the issue. And so it's really critical that we do try to like vote those ideals as much as we can. And then lastly is actually the government, right? So those elected officials I was just talking about, we see champions in the state house and state senate who are working so hard to make it happen, but they can't actually uphold progress alone. They need all these things. They needed to be voted in. They need us to be advocating for the specific vision, and they need people who are saving lives and helping get people services today. And so those things all have to work together. So this is another way that I really like to think about. So this is another thing that I really like to think about, this visual of really what is your theory of change, right? So at the beginning of this, lots of you put in the chat, here are the things that are motivating you: queer justice, the justice for the unhoused, carceral reform, justice reform. There's like a lot of things, economic equity, racial justice, social justice, and like all of those things are so worthwhile. And so this is something to think about what's your theory of how to get there, right? So on one side of this, on I think it's your left side, we see accepting existing power. So that's working and operating within the systems that exist currently to try to make it a little bit better in the moment or in the emergency. So again, that's where your direct service is. And on the other side, you have challenging existing power. So deciding that there's nothing okay with like the systems that we are within, which I think lots of us can feel that way from time to time, at least. And we need to challenge the existing structures in a way that actually like makes them work for people. And all the way on the furthest side to that, you see revolution. So like full on like overthrow the government style revolution. But there's a huge range here, right? And so you can really think about your own personal ideals, your community's ideals, the spaces that you work in, and the skills that you bring, of where your personal ability to support change might fall on this line. So again, on accepting existing power, we have direct services. We have even like self-help, right? Like where there's maybe like systems where you can access, say, the grant, the reimbursement, the housing project, the voucher, whatever, but you have to like go do it. It's not just like happening for folks. And then we have, working for the government is really accepting the existing power, but a lot of people, staff, elected officials are really trying to, impact change in good ways. Some of them aren't, and some of them are. And then we also have education. And I'm talking, yes, potentially teachers, but I also mean like knowing your rights, understanding how you're able to interact with a police officer or not, how to leverage your privilege in spaces, et cetera. We've got running for office, getting a little bit closer to the challenging existing power, especially depending on what your platform is. And then we've got advocacy and direct action. So advocacy is like writing letters, email campaigns, testimony, et cetera. And then direct action is also a part of advocacy. Really, it's just a little more specific of, protests, civil disobedience, and that kind of thing. Just to, make sure that everybody's still paying attention out there. Can people put in the chat an example of a direct service or another like thing that is important, but it is accepting existing power? Mutual aid, yes, I love it. Food pantries, yeah. These are critical services, right? We're not trying to see these go away. They're really important. Social workers, yeah, that's working as a nurse. Yes, these are really, really good examples. So more on the advocacy side, either advocacy to revolution, but like what are the type of actions that you might take, organizing, doing advocacy or direct action to try to influence the system a little bit more? Job research for appellants, love that. Speaking with legislators, great one. It's a great advocacy technique. We're gonna help you do that if you come with us on Thursday to the Capitol. Email campaign, organizing a protest, joining committees. That's a great one, Beth. I feel like that one actually hasn't come up in this space that often, but like, yeah, actually like putting yourself in places where with like structural power, right? Like hard power, not just softer influence. Okay, great. I'm going to take us to the next slide, but don't be afraid of putting things in the chat if needed. We're going to talk through this metaphor. And I know like this is all on the same theme, right? It's all about how these things have to fit together. But I think that this is such an important foundational move for advocacy. We'll have trainings in the future that are like more about how you even take this and build strategy on it, et cetera. But like it is such a critical place of understanding for all of us because you end up with conflict in the movement. You end up with conflict of folks saying like, my theory of change is better, my theory of change is better, my role is better, the service I'm doing is calling to me more, it's like having more of an impact, et cetera. But what we know is that we have to work together or we can't actually get there. And so that's why this presentation is so focused on that like collaborative foundation. So I'm going to read you this whole thing. And I know it's a lot of words. But this is one of my two favorite organizing metaphors. So there's a small village on the edge of a river. Everyone was happy in the village. Kids played in the river. Mothers washed their clothes there, and all was good. One day, a mother was at the river finishing up her laundry when she saw a body floating down the river. She called for help. A few folks nearby helped her drag the man out of the river. He was barely alive, unconscious. And so they took the man to the doctor for help. The next day, the man was still unconscious when some people on the river saw another body floating. Again, they pulled the man out of the river and took care of him. Each day, there were new bodies coming down the river, some men, some women, some children, and all needing help. As the village was doing their best to care for the people, one older man picked up his water bottle, walking stick, and started to leave the village. One of the villagers stopped the man and said, "You can't leave now. We need everyone to help take care of all the people we pulled from the river." The man answered, "It's about time someone goes upstream to find out why these people are falling in the river in the first place." So we can obviously see some examples of these things there. Anybody in the chat, or if you're, I mean, there's only a couple dozen of us. If you want to raise your hand or come off mute and tell me, like, what are the what's something here that's like what's the direct service component of this that's obviously very necessary. You can put it in the chat or you can come off mute.
The direct service would be actually pulling the people out of the river as they come down.
Iris, I feel like I saw you come off mute, but I wasn't able to hear you if you were saying anything.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
I can hear you on my end. Sophia, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys on mute.
All right, can y'all say that again? I was just had my computer on mute. That's what was going on. Iris, not to pick on you.
I was just going to say that direct action is actually caring for the people and taking them out of the river.
Yes, yeah, totally, absolutely. Which is like, it would be hard. Like, can you imagine? It's horrifying if you don't do that, right? This is what I'm saying. Like, you can't just not take people out of the river. Sorry for making you repeat yourself a bunch of times. My own technical difficulties. Yeah, and we've got it in the chat too. And so then what's the, like, I mean, it's obvious, right? But like, what's the advocacy component of this? Like, where's organizing come in? Yeah, the man stepping up and taking action. Exactly. Like, that's it. It's simple and it's illustrative, but I like this metaphor because both things are necessary. Like, that man's curiosity is important. Like, we need him to go upstream and like figure it out. But like, if you literally just abandoned all those people who were like actively being nursed back to health in the village, like that's actually really, really messed up, right? So yeah, here we go. We've got direct service, advocacy, and it takes both. So we're gonna have a little bit of like a shift in thinking, right? So this is our foundational like theory of change. Here's how all these things have to work together. Here's where we're all important vibes. Now we're gonna shift a little bit into thinking about like, okay, how do you actually do a little bit of this advocacy? Where do we start? Going from, all right, I've accepted that the role that I want to play is organizing your advocacy. Like, I want to be taking actions to affect that upstream change. Like, what do I do? The first thing that you got to do, beyond decide what issue it is that's like compelling you, like what is causing the people in your metaphorical river to be there, right? But then the next thing that you have to do is identify your target. So your target is basically two possible people or groups of people. One, your decision maker. So decision makers are often elected officials. They don't have to be, but they are very often either elected officials or people appointed to official boards. So I'm talking about city councils, mayors, committees, like the Air Board can be one, the Department of Corrections could be one, the governor, right? State legislators. And something to think about with these too is that can be either one person or it can be a body. So if you think about the state legislature in particular, you have a long list of voting members. And if there is either one person that represents you specifically, that's probably where you specifically will have the most influence. But also, as bills move through the legislature, they end up going to committees, they have to be voted on the floor, and essentially 50% of the vote plus one vote is how many you need to like pass it beyond that step, which means that you have to target those specific people that might get in your way, right? Those swingy voters. If it's like, say, a committee of 11 people and you need 6 votes, but 4 of them, are already with you. And then another, 2 of them are, I guess, wait, this is bad math. Yes, 4 of them are already with you, and then you know that you've got like another 3 that are like absolutely hate it. So you've got those 2 swing votes, right? Where it's like, oh, those are the 2 people that you actually need to target. That's your decision maker, right? It can feel like the whole body. It's good to target that whole body, but you want to be really trying to think about like who actually needs to be pushed, who is actually the deciding factor here. And elected officials who know that they're those swing people, they can be really challenging because they understand that they have a disproportionate amount of power. And that can be good and that can be bad depending on like who they're representing. And so you just want to really think about how are you influencing them. So that's the other group of people or person that can be your target, is who influences your decision maker, right? So a lot of times for elected officials, voters and their constituents hold a lot of influence, right? Like if you are in their district or their ward, and especially if it was a close district or ward, they need every single vote to count and to matter. And so they do actually want to be listening to you. We had a legislative panel on Saturday, and every single one of those 4 legislators spoke at length about how much and how important it was to them that they hear from their constituency regularly and often on an array of issues. I think it's one of those things where we just sometimes forget to hold our folks accountable, right? Yeah, we elect folks, which is us hiring them, and then we pay them with our tax dollars, and then we forget to manage them. And so those are very important components. So who might influence your decision maker beyond voters? Could be specific communities. Like if they ran on like a pro-business ticket, then local businesses might be really extra influential for them. There might be a specific company or employer in that district. There might be something where you know that it's a majority Latino voting area. And so like they're going to be more attentive to Chicano and Latino than they are for other folks, right? Think about who those big influencers can be. So here's then, once you've got your target, it's time to take action. So first is you got to identify your ask. So one of the things that we see often, right, is that we know what our problems are. Like we're frustrated or our community is suffering or whatever, and we see the injustice or we see the thing that we're trying to fix, and that is where we get to. And then that is where folks show up to their elected officials or other decision makers to say, here's some problem and I don't really know, but I'm furious at you and I'm furious at the system, which is such a reasonable way to be. And just to be clear, I would never like try to tone police somebody in the heat of the moment or somebody who's like personally impacted. Like we get heated, we have things to say, and it is a legislator or another elected official's job to think about how to solve the problems that we bring to them. That is absolutely in their job description. But if you want to be the most effective activist that you can be, really trying to dial in like what is your ask. Like if you either have a policy solution that you think that they should be running or supporting is a very good way to get like specific commitment, or to know that they're not going to commit so that you don't waste your time on that decision maker anymore. You go find someone else to influence them, right? So on Thursday, for example, when we take people to grassroots lobby, there is going to be mostly bills that have already come out and a bill that hasn't yet been given a number. And so the ask will be support this, like vote yes on this or vote no on this bill, right? Really specific ask, vote no on Senate Bill 109, because we know it's moving us in the wrong direction. The second thing is to pick a tactic with which to deliver your ask and then your like value statement. So we, at the beginning, all talked about like, here's the things that are motivating us. Tomorrow is a workshop that's storytelling for power. It's all about just figuring out like your sort of most motivating component of your life, your community, et cetera, that's like going to help influence decision makers. And you can call decision makers, you can email them, you can write handwritten letters, which are actually kind of great because they just take up more time and space than an email does. So it's a great spot for a snail mail. You can also testify in a hearing, you can lobby them, you can show up to town halls and ask them hard questions, you can protest, you can make public art. There's really a lot of tactics. And what you're going to want to think about is, are you effectively delivering your values message and then your ask? And then B, like what of these things is going to be the most influential for that person? I also want to say, I think that often people think that writing emails or making a single phone call doesn't really make a difference. That's why we organize, because one email can be a little bit, it might not get traction, but 100 emails in a week about a specific issue is absolutely getting the attention of that legislator. Like, absolutely, that is happening. Dozens of phone calls on a specific issue with the same ask. That is absolutely getting the attention of a legislator. So don't underestimate how influential those actions can really be, especially when they start to add up. And that takes me to this last point, which is get others to take action. So you pick that tactic, say it's a protest, you already say you have to do turnout for that. But again, if it's phone calls and you can get a few other people to make that phone call with the same ask, you're in a very different place than you are otherwise. This is one of my more inspirational quotes from Dolores Huerta, who's an incredible, incredible organizer. Every movement is an organizing opportunity, every person a potential activist, and every minute a chance to change the world. All right, folks, we're going to move into action taking. We're going to practice some of these things. My mouse is not doing the things that I want it to do. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to practice these things. There is a bill right now called Senate Bill 23-109. And what it's going to do is it's going to make it a class 1 felony punishable by 32 years in prison if you sell or share any drug that causes a fatal overdose. Now, I understand, obviously, that drug overdose is horrifying. But what we know is that other states that have these kinds of laws don't actually reduce the amount of overdoses, they don't reduce the amount of drug use, and they don't create any more support for either addicts, for users, for any way for people to get out of those circumstances. And of course, it also happens when it's more casual than that, when it's kids experimenting and they mess up and they don't deserve then to be on this permanent track where they are then in prison for 32 years and it's ruined their whole lives because they made a horrible mistake. So again, it does not, we know that there's just not good evidence that shows that this actually reduces harm and reduces danger for people in the state with this type of law. So this bill is going to the Senate Judiciary Committee. And what I would like us all to do is actually to write either a handwritten letter that you can put in the mail, or you can bring it to us on Thursday and we will help make sure that it gets to the right legislator, or that you can put into an email. So here is our call to action. We're going to contact the Senate Judiciary Committee and ask them to vote no on Senate Bill 109. Increasing penalties is just not the answer. This is not how we make communities safer. I've got for you a sample email. I'm going to put, these are all going to then be in a document, and then we're going to talk it through. Don't worry, there's going to be next steps. I'm going to give a couple minutes to read this. I mean, not a couple minutes, 30 seconds to read this. Now, I would like to say that if you either specifically have like a story or something that happened to you or a friend that you think is relevant to this, if you want to include it, you're very welcome. If there are other key points or values or reasons that you in particular are concerned about this or take action to oppose this bill that is taking us backwards instead of forwards in terms of how we deal with crime in Colorado, I would really encourage you to create the type of email with the tone and the specifics that you want it to, that is authentic to you and to your lived experience. You're the only one that's an expert in you. Okay, so I'm going to put, actually, Julian is going to maybe put in the chat a document. Richard, that's a great question about what evidence. I would definitely have to go cite things that, I mean, they exist. It's essentially, there's just studies where these types of laws, in states where these types of laws exist, and in places where they aren't, or where they get enacted, and then afterwards you just don't see the improvement. So that's the evidence that I'm talking about. Okay, so there is a link now in the Zoom chat, and what that has is a list of senators to reach out to on the Senate Judiciary and the sample email in the body of it. And we are going to split folks into breakout rooms only for 5 minutes. And what you're going to do in that breakout room is, if you are all feeling it on this Tuesday evening, I encourage you to have a brief discussion where you talk through here's like a thing that I'm going to say, or here's whatever, or here's the senator that I'm going to reach out to. But if not, just take the 5 minutes, like write down your own key points. And then if you drop in the chat, like, yes, I'm definitely going to send a letter so that we can like know if that's happening. And then when we come back, we'll see if people actually like wrote an email or a letter to folks. I totally recognize that there might be some of you who are like, I don't want to have to talk to people. So like I said, you can like take the time to just actually write your keynotes, to craft your email, to copy and paste this and like put all these people into it, and take that moment to make an action happen, to try to kill a bill that's really going to move us backwards and not actually move us forwards on this issue. All right. Do we have breakout sessions?
Yes, we do. I'm about to send folks out.
Fabulous. Again, just 5 minutes. Don't worry, y'all. I got a timer. All right, cool. Well, thank you everybody for taking that time. If I could see either like reactions, or you can put it in the chat, who of you either like actually wrote and sent the email, or like wrote a thing where you're like, yes, I'm actually going to send this. Like, who's committed? Who do we have pledges from? Yes, Iris. Phenomenal. All right, we've hit 3, 4, 5. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're at 7. I'm like very impressed with you all. 8. I also have to say, I like have loved the chat. Like, y'all are setting such a good vibe. Like, so I don't even know who it was, but like while I was talking about SB1, I thought that does nothing to do like deal with the root causes. And it's like, yeah, for sure. Like, it just doesn't actually fix anything. So I just really appreciate the way you all showed up this evening. All right. So it looks like we hit. See. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you, Shannon, for dropping those great resources in the chat for finding out more evidence. And we're just going to close out, but I just want to thank all of you for spending your time on this evening. I hope to see you all at the day at the Capitol on Thursday. There's definitely still time to register, so no worries if you haven't. And I am excited too with the potential to continue to work with you all. Some of you are more familiar faces or names than others. And like I said, this is, my third big event with the ACLU of Colorado. So I'm excited for us all to become like a little bit more regular human beings in each other's lives and in the movement together. That's a great question, Iris. What we're going to do 109. We're going to do just cause evictions, local rent control, allowing local rent control, raise the floor and let kids be kids as like our primary ones, but we will have like fact sheets and time for people to like dig in. And I will say too, if there are specific bills that are like up for you and you're like, this is really important to me, and that's what you end up wanting to talk to your legislator about, we're not going to stand in your way. So there's also that. Really appreciate all of you. I hope that you have a great rest of your evening, and I'm going to jump off of this Zoom.